Ladies and gentlemen, drivers, gig workers, and everyone in between, welcome to This Week in Rideshare podcast. I am your host, Jared Hoffa. It is Friday, January 10th, and this week, Uber gears up for Robotaxis. Drivers get paid, and New York City is fighting the lockouts. Legal Rideshare breaks it down. And from Legal Rideshare, I'm joined by the co-founder and lead attorney, Bryant Greene. Bryant, happy snowy Friday.
Happy snowy Friday, Jared. I hope everybody's driving safe out there. It's really coming down.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, I saw people falling on the streets just walking. I don't know how it is downtown. The roads are actually pretty clear. I'm looking outside right now, but man, they're messy on some of those side roads for sure.
Yeah, if you're off the main roads, you're slipping and sliding. So everybody be careful.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, today's just crazy. I don't know if it's the weather. I'm off my rocker today, but we're gonna get through this. We're gonna get through to plow to the weekend. That's the goal here.
That's the goal. Let's go.
Yeah. So before we begin, we haven't done this in a while. We did have some viewer comments about last week when we had Torsten on. Specifically, a lot of it was about the tax, how to deal with taxes and the new requirements. I just want to throw this up here quickly. This is from, I love this name, by the way, whatever 6496. They said, TurboTax or any tax online will walk you through filing for rideshare. It's super easy. Just track your mileage on Stride and then get that at the end of the year and do your taxes step by step. They go into explain that TurboTax or Free Tax USA will also assist. So I think that's pretty cool. Love to hear from viewers. As we discussed, Bryant, it's taxes. You can't avoid it. You got to better be safe than sorry.
Right, and that's the thing. If you got to do the taxes, you might as well use the resources that you have to make it work for you. If you keep track of your mileage, if you keep track of your wear and tear, then there are platforms out there like the commenter mentioned. There are accountants who can help you, and you can really work to minimize what you have to pay in taxes if you keep your ducks in a row. So that's really good advice.
Yeah, it's great advice. So that being said, we're going to jump into the first story here, one we've been talking a lot about recently. Robotaxis are here, and the rideshare giants are gearing up to deal with it. And this is from the Wall Street Journal, and they reported, quote, both companies will have driverless cars from Alphabet's Waymo and others on their apps this year. In the coming months, riders in Austin, Texas, and Atlanta will be able to hail a Waymo through the Uber app. Lyft plans to offer May Mobility's driverless taxis in Atlanta. Originally Uber and Lyft once invested billions of dollars in developing their own self-driving cars. Uber's co-founder used to say that the company needed to lead the pivot to driverless tech or risk becoming irrelevant. Uber has announced more than 5 U.S. robotaxi partnerships in the past 5 months, covering LA, Dallas, and other cities. Uber even struck a deal with Waymo that will allow customers in Atlanta and Austin to hail the company's driverless taxis only through the Uber app, a move that would prevent the driverless car maker from taking market share in those cities. Waymo will continue to operate its own app in other cities. So, Bryant, we've been talking a lot about the push to the driverless. We're now seeing, I would call it sort of the resistance or the response from, the rideshare giants as they are today.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how these collaborations are forming. We're seeing that the people behind the technology, the Waymos who have these driverless vehicles, really rushing to rideshare because they understand that's going to be a huge market for the use of the technology. And on the other side of the coin, we've got the rideshare companies running towards the driverless vehicle companies. So they're understanding that this is a natural partnership. This is a great way for both of them to utilize their service, utilize their product, and reach a huge market of people, such as all the cities that you listed off a couple seconds ago. As we've talked about in the past, Uber and Lyft thought they could do this on their own. It is extremely difficult to, one, make a vehicle generally, and two, to create this new technology. So once they saw that they were not going to be able to do it, or at least compete with these huge tech companies who have, frankly, more resources, like Google, to put these vehicles on the road, joining forces to make driverless vehicles part of the rideshare experience makes sense for both sides. And we're just seeing the very start of it now. And I would imagine in the next year or two that they're going to be in most major markets around the United States.
What's really interesting about this article that I didn't know, and I don't know if you caught this, and we've been talking a lot about the kind of the dichotomy between Uber and Waymo and how that ecosystem is going to work. We know that Waymo is launching their own service basically in self-driving cars. And, we knew Uber was partnering, but Uber, it's in this article, it states that, Uber struck a deal with Waymo that allows customers in Austin and Atlanta to hail it only through the app. So that partnership actually carves out an area where Waymo can't operate itself. It's a really interesting strategy. I'm not sure why Waymo agreed to that. I don't know how long that lasts, but I don't know if you caught that or had any thoughts on what you think they're doing.
Yeah, I did see that, and I'd be interested to know if that's in perpetuity or if that's just, for the next year or a couple of years. Because what I think may be happening there is Waymo understands that Uber owns the market in rideshare. Uber has way more downloads on its app and way more users for its app than Waymo could dream of at this point. So perhaps by normalizing driverless vehicles through the Uber app, Waymo may be carving out actually a market share for itself down the road where they can say, look, we're the ones who actually were behind the driverless vehicles on Uber, pull out their partnership with Uber down the road and say, hey, if you want to continue using this driverless feature, then come to us. So it's a short-term win for Uber, absolutely, but it may be strategically a long-term win for Waymo as people get used to the idea of not having a driver in their car.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point. That's probably what they're going to try to do. I imagine, as we always see with Uber specifically, I could see some lawsuits down the road with that. But that is a smart move. Get people used to using driverless cars, and then say, hey, you want to keep this feature? We have our own, and probably a slightly cheaper version of the app ourselves. So very interesting stuff. How things are moving so quickly. We're seeing stuff really develop very, very quick. And I'm sure we'll have more on it probably next week. We're going to move on to the second story here. Drivers in New York are owed more than $328 million, but they have to act fast. This was reported from NBC4. The New York Attorney General is encouraging rideshare drivers who believe they're underpaid by Uber and Lyft to file claims on or before January 31st to receive the funds they are due under settlements reached by the Office of the Attorney General. In November, they secured $328 million in back payments for drivers after an OAG investigation found that Uber and Lyft withheld funds from drivers and failed to provide valuable benefits. So, my screen disappeared here. So Brian, yeah, this is I think we discovered this, talked about this before, but I didn't. Drivers really have to act fast, and it covers, I believe, it covers all the way from 2014 to 2017, and for Lyft between 2015 and 2017.
Yeah, they want to, if you're a driver who drove during those periods of time, you want to make sure that you act quickly. You don't want to miss out on this opportunity to collect money that's owed to you. I love the fact that New York is really taking proactive steps to hold these companies accountable. When things have gone badly, when the companies have acted badly, they're holding their feet to the fire and making sure that drivers are getting what they're entitled to. So I know the drivers would have loved to have this money back then, back when they were working those hours and earning that cash. That money now is always better than money later. But the fact that New York is requiring Uber to go back, fix its wrongs, I think it's just an example for the rest of the country, and where we want to see local and state governments stepping in and demanding that their communities are treated fairly, treated with respect, and treated legally, forcing these large, multi-billion-dollar corporations to pony up and adequately compensate its workers.
Yeah, and if you are a New York driver and you're listening to this or watching this and want to know where to go, we actually have the link in our article. If you follow us on Medium, or if you subscribe to our email list, we will be sending out our typical This Week in Rideshare on Sunday, which includes the list where you can file the claim online. So remember, you have until the end of this month to get this through if you believe that you were owed money. Like you said, Brian, they're holding their feet to the fire and they're making sure the drivers get paid. I think it's a 2 for 2 there. So hats off to them.
Yes, absolutely.
For our final story here, New York City has a plan to fight what we know is pretty much the crazy Uber and Lyft lockouts. This is from Bloomberg, and they reported New York City is trying to close a loophole that Uber and Lyft have used to deny drivers millions of dollars in pay with a raft of new measures that would effectively raise their rates by roughly 6.1%. The commission has vowed to introduce changes to its minimum pay formulas for Uber and Lyft drivers after a Bloomberg investigation in October showed the companies had systematically locked drivers out of the platforms to game those calculations and save millions in future pay. Chief among the changes the commission is proposing is the way it sets so-called utilization rates, a gauge of the time drivers spend actually making trips versus waiting to be matched with riders. Those rates, which are part of the formula for driver pay and are currently supposed to adjust annually, were designed to ensure drivers were compensated for both trips made and the time spent en route to passengers waiting for work. This is a very interesting and, dare I say, exciting twist in the saga of lockouts. You know, Brian, we've talked about this, I think, even over the summer or the fall. We obviously assumed, I mean, I personally assumed there would be some sort of legal pushback, but it seems like they're kind of one-upping Uber on this. And so instead of trying to say you can't do this, they're switching the rules on them. Interesting.
Yeah. I love the fact again that New York is stepping up to protect the drivers. This is, we see so many times that Uber and Lyft try to, not act within the actual written letter of the law, try to act outside of the spirit of the law. That's exactly what was going on with the loophole in New York. And the governments in so many different states and municipalities just kind of turn a blind eye and say, what do you want us to do? Well, New York politicians are stepping up and making sure that drivers are protected. We could have predicted that Uber would look for a way to try to get out of paying drivers what they were due, trying to get around these minimum pay, minimum wage laws that New York set. Certainly, we can't predict every single loophole that they're going to find, but we can close them when we do find them. So New York has acted relatively quickly. We've been talking about this for a few months now, but in the grand scheme of things, this is quick action in terms of government. So I love that they're treating this urgently, that they're acting efficiently, and that hopefully none of this loophole lockout business happens any longer, and Uber and Lyft are forced to comply with the law as it was intended to be complied with.
Yeah, I believe the article, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, I believe the article did reach out to Uber and Lyft, and I believe they even said their classic line, well, if they do this, we're gonna dump the fees onto the passenger, but that's what they always say. And even when there isn't an increase in driver pay, they find some other thing to say, well, it's going to go over to it's going to go to the prices of the passenger. But I haven't really seen them trying to fight this yet. They're just kind of doing, again, kind of their threats. I also don't see when this would be coming into play. I'm looking at the article now. It says they're looking to do this, but I don't know when it's going to start. It also says the agency is proposing a new rule that would require Uber and Lyft to give a 72-hour advance notice to drivers if they intend to lock them out, so they have reasonable expectations for their working hours and incomes. That's also really interesting too, because we obviously, we don't know because we don't have the data, but we can obviously assume these lockouts are they're automatic and data driven. So their systems are just doing it on the fly, basically when it hits a threshold. Under this rule, which again I think it's a fair play on New York to say, okay, you want to do these lockouts, then give them a heads up. But we know that Uber can't do that because they're doing their system is doing the calculations in real time. So it's very interesting, the response that New York is getting back. I'm just curious to see how what Uber says back, how they bat it back to them.
It's obviously strategic. That 72 hours that they're requiring, that is at the heart of what Uber is trying to do. They, as you just mentioned, they can't give 72 hours notice. They don't have 72 hours notice. So by making that rule, they're preventing the lockouts from happening at all. So I love that New York is acting aggressively. I'm sure Uber will find ways to challenge this in court. in terms of their threats, they often make these threats. Sometimes the fares for riders do go up, but at some point they can't keep putting the burden on the rider, because the rider will just go to another rideshare company.
Right.
Going to be shopping around for a price, and at some point they're going to be priced out. So Uber's going to have to make a decision. Are we going to have to take this out of our pocketbook, which I would say they should. They're the multi-billion-dollar company who's nickel and diming everybody. Maybe they can eat a little bit of this. Or are we going to pass it on to the passenger, when eventually the passenger is just not going to pay the fare that we're asking them to pay?
Right. And yeah, and I did just confirm they did, the end of the article, they are of course giving the threats again about raising, but like you said, you keep raising, eventually you're just going to go somewhere else. You can't just keep, increasing the price to the passenger. You got to find a way to make it work. So these threats and the prices, it's not really an end game for them, but as always, probably by next week or in a couple of weeks, we'll see how they respond to it. But that's the stories this week. So, of course, Brian, I'll let you have the last say before we head off into the weekend.
Yeah, always want to remind everybody that Legal Rideshare is available for free consultations. If you find yourself injured in an accident while working or riding in an Uber or a Lyft, please give us a call. Consultations are always free. We can help set up the claim in the best possible way for you, which means maximum recovery for things like the cost of medical treatment, lost wages, pain and suffering, any other loss or damage that you sustain. I urge you to contact us quickly, as these cases do not get better with time, and we want to get started right away for you.
Thank you, Brian. And as I like to say, that is the end of This Week in Rideshare. See you next week.